Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to tint your taillights of a Hyundai Genesis, in this case using Vvivid's Light Smoke Headlight and Taillight Tint. First of all, just begin with a thorough cleaning of your taillight and then have a piece cut to size. You can see that I've got one cut there already. Again, I'm using Vvivid's Premium Plus Light Smoke Tint for headlights and taillights. What I'm doing there is double checking that I have enough coverage on both sides as well as top to bottom, giving myself a little bit of excess all the way around. Once I'm confident that I do have a piece big enough, I'm going to go ahead and start peeling the backing paper and the vinyl off the backing paper. And I'm only going to peel part of it because what I want to do is protect the main area of the vinyl, because since this is a clear vinyl, if you touch behind where you're going to apply to the surface of the taillight, your fingerprints will show through. Once I know that I've got it in place and that when I peel the rest of the vinyl off, it will basically make it all the way around the headlight with full coverage, that's when I'll start to apply a little bit more of the vinyl. And I'm picking the back side of the taillight because that's the flattest area, so I'm anchoring down on the flattest area, working my way towards the curved area. And you can see I'm already starting to hit some of the curved area there, and so I'll start to kind of curve my strokes a little bit as well, kind of down and then up as well as I head my way towards the front side, or the part of the taillight that it points towards the front. Continuing over and down, I'm just applying the vinyl. Again, the flat piece is fairly easy. I'm lifting it up there where the excess was grabbing onto the bumper and just tucking that in. There's no tension there because, again, I just laid that down flat. What I'm doing now is because there's so much excess towards that area, I'm just trimming off some of that excess because it's just grabbing the bumper too much. What you could do in preparation as well is add a little bit of painter's tape around the edge of the headlight on the bumper side to prevent the tape from sticking as well. And what I did there was, because I'm starting to reach a curved area, the vinyl is starting to bind up a little bit, and so I cut out a relief cut in a U shape there, and I'm doing that here again to prevent the vinyl from binding as I try to make my way towards that curved area, and as it starts to curve around towards the front. Basically, I'm creating a tab of looser vinyl that I can then work and maneuver my way around the curved areas there. So what I'm doing is I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to have to get ready to heat the area up. But before I do so, heat the area and stretch around. Before I do so, I want to make sure that all my easy flats are anchored down. You can see now that I'm going over the top part of the back part of the taillight there. Since there's no tension, it's loose, and I know there's a natural seam line that I can apply the vinyl towards. Going to give it a little bit of heat now just to relax some of that area. You can see there's some bunching up as it reaches that hard line towards the very edge there, and so I'm just giving it some heat to give it a little bit of to relax it out a little bit as I apply it, because although it's flat, you can see that it curves down towards the bottom left tip of the taillight. Once I reach where the taillight meets the quarter panel piece there, just cutting a release cut right there, knowing that so that I can create a tab, and you can see I'm folding that tab down over the back end of the taillight, where the other part on the front side there is still going over the quarter panel point. And so I'm taking a little bit of extra time to go ahead and lay down that flat part up there, since it's easy and I can take care of that right now. All right, so now I've reached a part where I'm getting ready to go around the main bend here, and then apply towards the front. So I peeled it back, peeled off the backing paper. What I'm going to do is, because I did make that cut, what I want to do is curve the bottom of the cut up so that it's not a sharp line cut that could, as I pull, rip and go straight down into the taillight area itself. So I curved it up so that way it won't split the vinyl. And now that I'm ready to go, I'm going to give it a little bit of heat. I have the heat gun on low, and I'm basically heating the vinyl to soften it up and give it some stretch, so that I can conform that vinyl all the way around the bending curved area of the taillight. You can see that part of that vinyl tab there fell on me, so I picked it up, and now I'm just stretching it over the highest point where my fingers were rubbing there just a second ago, over the highest point or radius of the taillight. So now that I made my way around a little bit, I'm setting up some more vinyl towards the bottom, working my way down around this curved area. I'm going to lift it up just a little bit. Be careful when you lift it up to stay on the part that's not going to be applied so that your fingertips do not leave fingerprints on the areas that you will apply the vinyl to. So I just lifted it up so I can get it up and over. There's a curved bend at the bottom of the tail light there that you can see. And so getting that all set up, and then now I'm going to address the top side. Just lifting the vinyl up a little bit off of the quarter panel so that I could tuck it in and lay it across the top side of the vinyl where it kind of forms a flat shelf-like area on the top. Picking the vinyl up a little bit, and I'm going to hit it with just a touch of heat, and you can see there that because of the stretch with the heat, it shrunk itself down and over the top side of that vinyl there. That's exactly what you want to do. What that does is it relieves the tension and shrinks the vinyl back. And then two, causes that, because it's shrinking back over that, it's causing the vinyl to hug onto the taillight, and therefore it won't shrink any further, and it's grabbing a little bit harder onto the taillight itself. So now I'm going to address the, keep moving towards the front of the car there. Going to give it a little bit more heat to assist me since the vinyl's cooled off. Holding up the vinyl, giving it some heat and just a little bit of tension to help glass things out a little bit more. You can see I've got some tension going by those horizontally shaped wrinkles, but you can see now I'm pulling to my right straight towards the front and then down. So that's a triangular shaped pull. And then I'm basically going to apply towards the flat area where it's smooth, hit that bottom side there, and then pull up on the vinyl where I had the horizontal wrinkles going in that particular stretch, so I can get some of those horizontal wrinkles out. So essentially I'll be pulling it perpendicular to get those horizontal wrinkles out. All right, so I've laid it down just a little bit more. I'm going to repeat that same process again, lifting the vinyl up, giving it some heat. That one great thing about this particular vinyl is it applies like regular vinyl wrap, where it's repositionable, it has air egress in it, it's stretchable. When you heat it, it does shrink back. And so basically I'm using those techniques to wrap around this taillight here. And so you can see I'm again pulling in a triangular shape, and I'm applying the glass part, or the most stretched part, over the high point of the radius or the curve of the tail light. So now that I've done that stretch and worked it over the high point of the tail light, I'm just giving it, working the vinyl down, giving it some heat, shrinking it down onto the top of the tail light. And then once it's shrunk back and relaxed, now I'm just laying the vinyl down nice and easy, so there's no tension on now in this part, the top side of that tail light. So just continuing that process on, working it down, working it to the edge, smoothing everything out, using my hard edge as I get towards the towards where the tail light and the fender piece meet, and then my buffer side for laying down the main portions. You can see I'm finishing off how the where the vinyl goes to across the radius of the tail, which is in the darker spot on the top side there, and I basically laid the top side of the tail light on that heads towards the front. Now to address the bottom lower side, again, because I stretched it out, I'm giving it some heat. You can see it shrinking back and glassing out as I do that, just holding it up. And then I'm going to, now that it's been warmed up slightly and shrunk back, I am going to apply the vinyl. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of tension to help keep everything glassed out and smooth. But right now I'm going to cut off some of this excess because I just had too much flopping around, making it more difficult to work with than it needed to be. And so because I took out all that extra time to do all that, the vinyl cooled down, so I'm going to give it a little bit more heat. You can see it just smoothing out. I'm not pulling at all on that really, just enough to kind of hold it out. And I'm going to just hold it out, and you can see I'm using my forefingers as a broad grip versus my thumb, which would just be a point grip. It's all the pressure's on one point there. And then right there, where you can see the very bottom valley or reverse apex of that curve there, I'm cutting to make a relief cut. I'm cutting and making a relief cut to give basically a new tab right where my hand is holding there. That way it's not binding up on that curve on the end of that at the bottom of the tail light there. So giving a little bit more heat to help myself out, just relaxing everything, trying to make sure everything goes down nicely. Warm vinyl is a little bit more malleable, easier to work with, or can be easier to work with. And then you can just apply with little to no tension, because I've taken all the stretch, or I've not taken all the stretch out. I've heated it so that there's no more stretch in the vinyl itself. What I'm doing there is holding the vinyl up to help maneuver it and tuck it into the taillight edge, just going around all the edges, pushing it in, bringing it up just a little bit, heating it some more, shrinking it back if there's any stretch left in it, because I might have stretched it just a little bit, holding it up and pulling slightly to be able to glass it before feeding it in and down. And so continuing that process, tucking everything along the edge at the very bottom valley, or bottom apex, and then working my way up towards the top. Taking some extra time here to go ahead and make sure everything's tucked in nicely, meets the edges, has no tension or minimal tension, to reduce any chance of pullback on the vinyl itself. So just making my way up, continuing back on, since I finished the part of the taillight that goes towards the front, going back towards the back side there, making sure everything's tucked in. I like to take a little extra time to make sure everything's tucked in nicely, so that I'm fully prepped for the cut, so that it'll be the nicest, cleanest cut that I can do. What I'm doing now is, since I got everything tucked in, I'm just lifting it back a little bit, giving it some heat to make sure that if there's any shrinking going to happen, that happens now versus after I cut it. So I'm just going over all my edges with a little bit of heat. Again, keep your heat on low, because you risk cracking the housing. It's just a plastic housing, these headlights and taillights anymore, where high or intense heat can possibly crack the housing. So give it some low heat, keep the heat moving when you do that. And then now that I've done that, I'm just going around the perimeter of the edge, make sure everything is tucked in tightly, making relief cuts or taking off excess as necessary, like I just did there and previously. Again, making some relief cuts to allow the vinyl to maneuver or move into certain areas more easily, so that you can ensure good and full coverage. And so all I'm doing right now, guys, is just doing that process all the way around, using now a micro squeegee to get that tuck, a little bit tighter tuck, all the way into there. Heat as necessary, to make sure that once you've done that process, that you didn't overstretch anything, or you'll know that if you did, when you heat it, it'll shrink back. Or if nothing else, you give it some heat so that it relaxes, and you know that your edge is good and it's ready for cutting. What I did there, I found two little bubbles that what I did was poke one little hole in each bubble, and then pressed out the air coming out, and then heated it as well. Sometimes bubbles get trapped in more so than the air egress in the film can allow to escape. And so once you have everything ready to go and are ready for, or feel that you have everything tucked in nicely, you can get ready for the cutting process. So when you're getting ready to cut, like I'm getting ready to do, snap off a new blade on your snap off blade, so that you have a super sharp blade. And then what you'll want to do is, there is a gap between the housing and the body of the car. Just float the tip of your blade in that gap, and I use the side of my blade against the inside edge, pointing up and in towards the car, or up and in behind the tail light, to cut. You want to make sure your blade is super sharp, so that it just slides right through the vinyl with no issues and no resistance. You can see it's just slicing right through that. You want to slice the vinyl. If you have to pull, or it's dragging it, or you have to chop at it, it's probably not set properly, and you'll have to do some minor adjustments. So I'm going around there. On this top edge, there's a hard line that I can follow along between the case housing of the taillight. So that's what I'm following there. And then once I got that set up, continue the cuts, pull away some of the excess vinyl. When you pull away the excess vinyl, take a little bit of care and precaution doing so. Don't just wantonly yank it off, because you might not have cut all the way through, and if you just rip it off thinking you've cut everything through, you risk pulling some of the vinyl off of the taillight or the surface that you've applied the vinyl to. So take your time. Now I'm going around the curved area on the front part of the taillight that's pointing towards the front, making sure that I have the blade in and behind the taillight, and then as I transition to the quarter panel piece, pointing it basically into the car so that it's floating between the fender or the quarter panel piece and the top of the taillight. And so I finished cutting all the way through, peeled off the excess vinyl. This taillight is fully wrapped, ladies and gentlemen. So the last things I like to do are to heat all the edges to make sure everything falls down nice and tight. Everything shrinks on to where it needs to be. Vvivid has a heat activated adhesive, so by hitting it with some more heat, you're helping the adhesive activate and grab, basically adhere harder to the surface you've applied it to. I want to make sure I take care to tuck in any ends that may be slightly loose. You may have a very small sliver of excess, which is fine, that you want to make sure you're tucked in so everything is nice and tight and clean. Use heat to find any air bubbles that may be trapped on the surface of the taillight, which is what you can't see because I'm blocking, but that's essentially what happened. I found a small bubble there, so I was working it out. And sometimes, again, it traps a little bit more than the air egress can handle, so I'm taking just the very tip of my knife, poking tiny little holes in there, and then giving it a kiss of heat to warm things up. Get that air, when you hit it with a little bit of heat, air expands, and in this case it'll push out. If you put a hole in the bubble, the expanding air will push out of the hole, because that's the area of least resistance, and then heating everything back down. All right, guys, so that is basically how you wrap your taillight. This one's a little bit minorly complicated because of the curvature, but not too bad at all. Just making sure everything looks good one last time. Going back on that area where I found some small bubbles, and so I just want to poke tiny little holes there and then press out the air. In this case, I don't want to push too hard, and again, just a tiny little pop of the bubble to make sure that any air that's trapped in there, more than the air egress technology will allow, you can get that out of there and make everything look nice and clean and presentable for yourself or your customer if you're doing this for a client. Last minute checks, last minute smoothing down, and this is a fully wrapped taillight. So guys, that's a fully wrapped taillight. You can see everything is nice and clean, tucked nicely and tightly, smooth areas. Took us a little bit of extra time to make sure everything is good. So hopefully you found this video to be instructive and informative and hopefully helpful. Give you maybe a little bit of confidence that this is not too bad of a process. If you thought this was a good video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys.